Thomas the Storyteller. The reason I even get to be up on this distinguished panel with these gentlemen is simply because I've been doing traditional storytelling for 25 plus years. So I know the old school walk up to a fire and tell stories side of the equation. Now these two gentlemen are great storytellers, and their chosen medium is pretty much writing, although I have to tell you both of them are pretty damn good speakers in my opinion. And my opinion holds water because I've seen a lot of speakers. I'm going to read their bios so Jim and Todd can get a little sleep. So we'll start off with Todd. Todd Johnson McAfrey describes himself as an author, artist, pilot, and geek. He is often known for continuing the Dragon Riders Kern series in collaboration with his mother, Anne McAfrey. He wrote his first sci-fi story when he was 12. He has written 8 books in the Pern universe, and there are 13 other titles in his name, both as Todd Johnson and as Todd McAfrey. His recent works include The One Tree of Luna in 2012, a collection of 7 short stories, and The City of Angels in 2011. Now we turn to Mr. Jim Butcher, who, by the way, is a pretty mean larper as well. Jim Butcher is a New York Times best-selling author, best known for his contemporary fantasy book series, The Dresden Files. Fanboy squeak. All right. About a professional wizard in modern Chicago, now with its 15th title in release. He has written in the traditional fantasy genre for his Codex Alera, sorry, can't read my own handwriting. Codex Alera series, currently with 6 books, and his new steampunk trilogy. Everybody go, ooh. All right, steampunk trilogy, The Cinder Spires, is in the works. His resume includes a laundry list of skills that were useful a couple of centuries ago. He plays the guitar quite badly. He's an avid gamer. I know this because we've talked about first edition AD&D. He plays tabletop games in a variety of systems and a variety of video games on PC or console because he swings both ways. And LARPs. And he's an excellent LARPer. And my son shot him in the chest on Friday, I think. Dad, I shot Jim Butcher. Great son.
He was a good man too. I spun around, twitched.
Weren't they on the same side?
And he LARPs whenever he has the time for it. And ladies and gentlemen, the topic is, what is storytelling? And so what we're going to do is we're just going to open it up to what is storytelling, and then we'll at some point come back to you guys for some questions and we'll play with it and have some fun with it. You guys ready for it?
Sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Let's tell some stories. So I'll start with you, Mr. Todd, and then I'll take a seat. Storytelling. When did you first fall in love with it?
I think storytelling is ingrained into everyone. And the difference, my mom used to say that the difference between a writer and somebody who isn't is a writer can't not write. They have to tell stories. I grew up part of the time in Ireland, and my teachers, my Irish teachers who were teaching me English, the subject, were saying things like, you must have kissed the Blarney Stone. And I said, no, never, and still haven't and won't. Partly because there is this fear of belief that if I do, it will crack and smolder and everything. But yes, I've been accused of doing that and telling stories since forever. Vivid imagination, and I guess storytelling is a way to communicate, and it's a way to have fun.
How about you, Jim? Storytelling.
I got started on stories. I probably got started on Bible stories. David and Goliath, I think, was probably my first really formative kind of story to get, which probably had something to do with the fact of all the bullies I seem to attract in school. But that said, I think storytelling, the entire point of storytelling is that a story is just a question, And the story is the answer to the question. So the beginning of the story gives you the question. The rest of the story is just us trying to get you to wonder what the answer to the question is. And the question's usually, this is the funny bit, the question's usually Boolean. It's usually a yes or no question. You know, is Luke going to save the princess? You know, is Frodo going to destroy the ring? And then we spend the next 3,000 pages or the next 20 minutes trying to make you wonder about the answer to yes or no. And that's kind of what we do is make you wonder if we're going to say yes or no at the end. And that's the entire point of the exercise. So if it wasn't so much fun, I don't know if I would really believe that you could do that and do it for a living. But wow, I have such a good time at it. I think I would be doing it even if I wasn't going to make money. So I'm really glad, and I'm also able to like feed myself on it. That's very cool.
Actually, that leads me to another question. What would you do if you weren't a writer?
I would probably still be working tech support somewhere.
Some of the best novels are written by tech support writers. I just want you to know this.
Yeah. That's where I wrote the first 3 Dresden books, and the first Alara book was while I was working a tech support job. And I worked all night, and usually it was done by midnight, and from midnight to 6 a.m. with nothing else to do. And you can only play video games for so long, and then you get bored and have to start writing. So that's kind of the way it works.
See, it's not just me. How about you, Todd? What would you be doing if you weren't a writer?
Oh, God knows. I was in software for 16 years and moved to writing full-time when the software industry took its usual kerfuffle shortly after the dot-com burst. But I was actually, you know, we talk about stories, and the truth of the fact is we're all telling stories. We never really stop telling stories. So the Pern story is, oh, Todd McAfrey, you know, or Todd Johnson McAfrey never wrote anything before writing a Pern book. It's like, well, yeah, except for that, God help me, I do try and forget it. My one Dinosaurs episode, which I got paid enough money to learn how to fly. Yeah, and of course our stories changed, because when I was a kid, my story was, I am going to become a pilot, I'm going to go join the Air Force, I'm going to become a fighter jock, I'm going to get my 1,500 hours, I'm going to go join NASA, and we're going to go explore the stars.
Excellent.
You know, so that was that story. And then I got these, and at the time, now apparently the rules have changed, which really, you know, steams me. At the time, you couldn't wear glasses and be a pilot, a commercial pilot or anything else. Now apparently they're so desperate for pilots, they're pretty much taking anybody.
That's your chance.
No, the other side of it is at this point I'm informed enough to understand that most pilots actually make worse livings than most writers.
Oh.
And, you know, Jim and I are doing pretty well, but most writers, you know, are sort of sub-poverty level in their income. So as I say, my stories have been changing over time, and will continue to change. I guess we continue to become a new story every day. But I actually started back I was first published in '84, no, somewhere around there. Again, the stories change. And so it's been a lot of fun. If I weren't I don't know if the industry is going to stay put. The issue with publishing today is the bricks and mortar companies are going. How do new books get discovered? And that's a huge problem.
Word of mouth.
Well, ultimately word of mouth, but
Yeah.
word of mouth is not. The cool thing about a bookstore is you go in there and there's all this great free advertising. You walk into any bookstore, somebody's advertising Jim Butcher books just for them, right? And Pern books and all this other stuff. They're sitting there on the shelves just begging to be picked up. It's not the same when you're on the ether, when you're in the internet world. And that becomes an issue. How do you get discovered? I mean, let's see, in the internet world, the big pop-out that everybody can point to would have to be 50 Shades of Grey, which says an awful lot about what's available, you know, what you see on the internet and what word of mouth carries. So the future, you know, publishing has always been saying this, though. I mean, I'm lucky that I've been seeing this for more than 50 years now. So publishing has always been on the verge of collapsing completely and going away. And writers will never make another dime.
That printing press thing, it'll never work out.
Yeah, no, papyrus was the way to go, you know. You want to write it out in longhand like people over there.
Print it in mud, that's the trick.
Yeah, and let the mud dry. You know, that's the way to go. Anyway, so it's still an interesting world, and I am, for one, looking at, okay, what are the other possibilities? And you know, there's no guarantee that the novel itself won't transform. It's only been around for about 200 years or so. And we have, as you say, storytellers. So what's the alternate storytelling possibility? Can we tell a better story in a different way?
Well, speaking as somebody who goes into the way back, because I do it at its most basic form, the very first form of storytelling was somebody running into a cave and going, essentially saying, hey, don't go outside, there's a cave bear, he'll eat your head. You know, and the other person was sitting there going, okay, story, plot, and, you know, antagonist, protagonist, plot, struggle, goal, resolution. We got it all right there in that story. And then what happened is we slowly developed forward from there, but storytelling became the most powerful way to pass on our experiences, our knowledge, our ideas and beliefs. It became the father of all the other arts. Dance was the mother of all the arts, and the father and mother got together and they had music and all these other arts. And it has been moving forward since then. If you want to talk about the power of story, Abraham Lincoln, Mark Twain, Jim Henson, Jesus Christ, Buddha, all these people knew how to use story to communicate evocatively. And so,
Well, let's not forget that there's a dark side to story as well.
Absolutely.
Adolf Hitler was a great story.
yes, he would be your Sith Lord version of a storyteller. You can absolutely use storytelling to do the dark side of it too.
And more recently, we got involved in a war in the Middle East, which we probably shouldn't have been involved in it because somebody told us stories about weapons of mass destruction.
Absolutely. But I think that, as you were saying, how storytelling is evolving in through various mediums. Speaking of mediums and storytelling, you've seen your artwork, you've seen your art turned into another medium in the case of the Dresden Files.
Yes.
And how is that different for you as to the writing, as to seeing it in television?
Oh, it could have been. It could have been worse. I saw the first draft, you know, so it could have been a lot worse. It was very strange watching it cross over and seeing the similarities and the differences and trying to understand, you know, why these differences existed the way they did. And some of them there were excellent reasons for it, some of them there were no reason for it. But it was interesting, you know, kind of watching it happen and seeing what is exactly going to, you know, how is this going to affect things. In the end, I decided that it was an alternate universe Dresden Files, you know, and that's fine.
Oh, cool.
You know, so that there's an alternate area somewhere with the blasting. You know, his staff is made out of a hockey stick. You know, he got adopted by somebody else who lived, instead of Ebenezer, he got adopted by somebody else who lives further north.
And likes Jeeps instead of VW.
Sure,
Yeah,
he's a Wings fan.
Oh no, the Jeeps thing I totally understood. That was a change that made sense because it costs so much money to film in a VW bug. That you've got to have a trick bug that comes to pieces if you want to film in one, and those are really expensive. So they said, well, we need another vehicle that was produced about the same time that would also be easy to maintain and repair. And one of the guys who was one of the writers said, you know, I was a mechanic on Jeeps in Korea, and you can put those things back together with duct tape and hanger wire, and he could totally roll in a Jeep, he'd be fine. And they were like, okay, fine, we'll have a Korean War era Jeep then for his vehicle.
What about the hockey stick?
What?
What about the hockey stick?
Robert Wolf was Canadian.
Okay.
And, you know, and I thought, you know, who's going to let him carry hockey sticks around? And then I got on the plane to go visit the set from Kansas City to Toronto. And I got on the plane and there were 15 guys with hockey sticks on the plane. And it's like, just carrying the hockey sticks and nobody said anything about it. I mean, it was a hockey team. You know, they all had their clubs with them, and everybody was like, oh yeah, that's fine, it's hockey sticks, man. And apparently that blew right through security. I don't know how that works, but they did it. And that was in a post 9/11 world.
Wow.
Good Lord.
I can't imagine anybody being hurt by a hockey stick.
I'd say what we have there is a failure of the imagination. Wow. Yeah, no, the Wyrd has been under option since 1984. And the stories behind that are great. Mom and Diane Wayne actually wrote the original, the first screenplay version for an animated version, because in '84 they couldn't make it a live action one. So they had it be 84 minutes, and they decided, which is going to bring up an interesting topic, they decided that Lessa would be okay if Fax was just severely maimed. And so at the end of the story, Fax has been leading the holders in revolt, and we have the battle of the Wyrd, and all of a sudden Thread falls at the end of it, and Fax runs off and is consumed by Thread, good riddance. And I'm sitting there going like, yeah, I could just, you know, Bob's character is plot, the character that's willing to let Fax live ain't Lessa, wouldn't do a bunch of other stuff. I was like, Mom, that's wrong. But it wasn't the worst. We had, probably my favorite one was when they were going to make a YA animated cartoon version, sort of based on the Harper Hall. And they decided that in order to make it work, well, one, they actually wanted to have dragons with manes, so they could sell My Little Dragon. But then the other one that really just kicked it on out the door was they wanted to have an evil wizard on the Red Star to pull a lever and draw a thread. And it was kind of about that point that we started saying, no, if you want to renew the option, we're sorry. And then after that, it went over to some other company, and finally was about to get made on it, on the WB as it was then. But they decided, having had so much success with Xena Warrior Princess and all this other stuff, that they had to have their own little rewrite to give it that WB feel. And when it came back to the director, it had such great lines at the beginning as Jackson, somehow managing, pre-birth to say to Lessa, now would be a good time for you to do one of your magic tricks. At which point, thank goodness, the director walked off the set and went on to do Battlestar Galactica. He was Ron Moore. So, yeah, stories. Cool stories.
He was Ron Moore.
He was Ron Moore. Yeah.
Do you realize that now that we've had enough dragons in film that you could have a dragon casting call?
As far as I'm concerned, Goblet of Fire was basically a special effects demo reel, and bad.
Dragonheart for Sean Connery, first dragon up, okay. You're auditioning for Pern.
Hey. We're sorry, we'll call you sometime. Never. They've had a lot of, Aragon, which of course was, that was a funny one, because, he was a young lad, and Mom gave him this brilliant blurb. Much later, when she was older, something else came up, and she says, oh my God, this is almost exactly, what? And I said, you actually gave him a blurb, and she went, oh. So, and they made that into a film that died. This is one of the reasons why dragons haven't done so well. It's because there's, with the exception of How to Tame Your Dragon, there's very few places you can point at that was a box office smash with dragons. So, Hollywood sits here and goes, nothing made money, right away, say no. Hollywood loves to say no.
I don't know, there's this Hobbit movie. Yeah. There's this Hobbit movie.
Oh yeah, that helps a little bit too. Yeah. That's a bad dragon. So
but that's a wyvern. That's a wyvern, not a dragon.
Yeah, that too.
So. I'm old school, like I said.
There's no sting in the tail, it can't be a wyvern.
Okay, I have to give you that one. Hang on a second, Monster Manual.
Exactly. First edition monster.
Okay, I remember the old white box. I remember the old chainmail rules.
Oh man, now we're talking.
But literally chainmail came out, and then the first little white box book set came out.
Right.
I'm not saying we're old. When we carved our dice out of mastodon bones while they were still on the mastodon.
They actually found an ancient 20-sided dice from some Egyptian. Yeah, so now. Right, Gygax has some things to answer for.
He went back in time. That explains the rise and fall of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, he's not actually dead. He's back in time. That's what happened.
That die is from the ancient Egyptian game Mastodons and Mayhens.
Mastodons and mayhem.
Those are Egyptian words for Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
So,
So now we have a whole new story. We're telling about how Gary Gygax went back in time and developed
They are.
Mastodons.
didn't they cover that in Futurama?
I don't know. I love to say that when there's a lot of traffic around, it's really time travelers come back to watch me surreptitiously. It's one of those morale boosting or paranoia boosting, or maybe both at the same time. I'm not quite sure.
Well, both of you have seen your works done in print, and how about audio?
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about hearing your first audiobooks? What did you notice any difference in the storytelling when you were going through your audiobooks?
A little bit in terms of when Marsters is reading, he's very busy getting into the character and trying to present all the characters as different people. So they don't sound the way they sound in my head when Marsters is doing them, because it's a different head that's creating that story. But at the same time, really my main issue with listening to the audiobooks is I read faster than this. But you can't really expect him to get that audio out very much faster. So.
How about you?
At one point we had Derek Hill reading some of the Wyrd books, and he did a very nice job. I got and I apologize, I can't, it was sort of beyond my control, and it left me rather hurt. When they did the audiobook for Dragon's Time, they never checked with me on pronunciations. And ditto for Sky Dragons. And so my heroine's name is Jinna, and they pronounced it Zinna. So immediately it's kind of like, and worse. And they should have known better because they had other books, or other audiobooks to look at in the series. They decided that they would take the apostrophe and just make it be silent. So Wyrd Kalior became Clior. And at that point, it's kind of like, I can't listen to this anymore, guys. Don't do this to me.
And you guys have also seen this interpreted into other languages as well.
Well, not so much. I mean, yes, it's been translated and everything, but I don't read German well enough or French well enough to do much more than open the book and go, Kinder, Kinder die, okay, I'm lost, or Kinder Schreck, and I'm done. So.
Yeah, I'll occasionally get a book that is in a language that the characters I don't recognize, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be reading left to right or up to down, or left to right and up to down. And it'll just be mysterious, and it'll have a cover that I'm not sure what it has to do with anything. It'll just come in an envelope from my agent with no letter or anything like that. And so it'll just be this book, and I'll be like, is this one of my books? I'm not sure what I'm looking at, and I'll open the first few pages, it'll be Chinese characters, and then in English, Jim Butcher. With a little copyright attached to it. I'll be like, oh, this is my book. Okay, that changes completely.
This is marvelous.
How are you doing on covers? Because at one point, Dragon Quest came out in the UK, and it came out with a naked woman on a Chinese pug dog. And that's one. This is old. This is 70s maybe.
That explains a lot.
Well, yeah, but my mom blew her top, and after that she had it in all of her contracts, and she had cover approval. Because she didn't mind, she had no complaints about the Swedish edition, where you have basically Brunhilde on a dragon, not wearing anything. So it was kind of like, okay, we'll live with that one because it's Swedish, and maybe they just goes that way. But the English should know better. And she was really, it wasn't bad enough that the woman was naked. It was a little bit of a lens blur there, but the woman was naked. Okay, we're at 20,000 feet. People, do you know what the temperature at 20,000 feet is? It's like minus 34 degrees Celsius. You will freeze to death with clothes. And you're on a dragon, and so you get a wind chill factor. But that's, but then you make it a Chinese pug dog, and it's kind of like, no. So have you had cover problems like that? Have you ever had a cover that you're like, I will not have this happening?
No. Although I also kind of get the mafia version of cover approval. Well, you approve this cover, don't you? Like that. The only thing in the covers is the issue with Harry wearing a hat in all the covers, and he doesn't wear one in the books, and I've made it a point to mention that, you know, several times in the books. So now I've got a running joke, so I'm just rolling with that.
Yeah, I've been wearing a hat and a duster for years, and then the Harry Dresden, and so everybody now, when I wear the hat and the duster, go, "Oh, you're pulling a Dresden." I'm like,
I'm sorry.
no, you're just hip.
Is Harry going to have a hair loss problem like some of us have had to deal with?
Yeah.
And will he discover actually that there are reasons why he wants to wear a hat? Like I did. I know. My birthday treat many years back was to spend the day at Disneyland. And the next morning I pop in the shower as always and turn it up nice and hot, get in there and go, ah! And it was the first time I realized you can actually sunburn your scalp. And also, by the way, I was losing my hair. So he's not going to have this problem?
No, because it's more problems for him if he has hair that somebody could clip and take away and do horrible things with.
Oh,
So
good point. Good
yeah.
point.
Yeah. So that's it. You have witches coming after your hair will grow back.
Plus, there's a pretty good chance, I mean, every Harry Dresden novel, you have no idea whether he's going to live or not. You know, you hope that he's going to live, but dear Lord, you couldn't put this man through a wood chipper 2 or 3 times and not suffer the abuse that he's got.
Yeah, he's kind of high on post-traumatic stress.
Yeah. Lord help us, should
no,
be.
he's fine. If you ask him, he's fine.
I imagine if you asked him, he'd say something like, I'm fine, don't worry about me, I'm fine.
Yeah, that's cool. There's nothing really wrong with me.
Yeah. It's kind of like me and mad cow disease, because I ate all the beef in Europe and they won't let me give blood anymore because they're a little bit afraid that something might be wrong with me.
But the thing is Lord help us should any of our characters actually meet us in real life, because they're going to have a bone to pick with us.
I don't know.
Really? That whole thing with it, George R.R. Martin. Okay. Why doesn't he text? Because he's already killed 144 characters?
George has George is a nice guy.
Oh,
He really is.
I mean, and he did, those of you might remember, he did the old Beauty and the Beast way back when, was it Ron Perlman was being
It was Perlman,
yeah. It was absolutely gorgeous stuff, and unfortunately Hollywood went ahead and said something stupid, which is what Hollywood usually does. Then he went off and run. But Game of Thrones, of course, is I think he made no bones about it, it's the War of the Roses told in a different way. So it's an interesting tale.
Since you kind of threw it back, I'm going to take it back a little bit more. I'm going to say stories that have inspired you from history, and then I'm going to ask you about people besides writers who are storytellers who inspired you. So, what are some of the stories in history that inspired you? And we'll start with that.
Are you looking at me?
I'm looking at you.
I can give you an answer if you need to think some more.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so one of my favorite heroes of all times, even though he has all sorts of flaws, he's a beautiful character, Winston Churchill. Oh my God, that guy could talk, that guy was an egotist, that guy was amazing. I mean, he was in his 70s when he brought his country through the Second World War. And he spent most of his 60s sitting there going, you need to stop this guy in Germany now, and nobody bloody well listened. You know, he knew Hitler was a menace long before. But prior to that, he'd been a fairly egotistical young man, and of course went off into the Boer War and all this other stuff, and just really, actually, you know, if you read his writing, he writes very, very well. Always did, and gave beautiful, beautiful speeches, you know.
Great eloquence.
Yeah, amazing, and worked very hard on them, even though he tried to deliver he made it look as though he was delivering things extemporaneously, but he had things plotted out and printed out on cards and all. So he was one of the cool guys.
So he was a storyteller who...
Well, he was a storyteller who decided he was going to have far more fun making history than telling about it. But he also did a lot of reporting as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, I forget the specific Viking, but there was a Viking warlord who was captured by his enemies, and he decided he was going to write one last epic poem before they threw him into the pit and killed him. And he kind of invented a whole new form of meter. And when they got him up and they were going to sacrifice him, he says, I have this piece I want to present. And he read it out, and they said, damn, that's good. we can't kill you now. And I'm guessing that that's probably, you know, in Jim's case, they won't kill him until finally he has all the novels out.
Yes, well, I've got a charmed life until then.
But
Yeah, thank you. Just for you, sir. I'll make it a point not to die.
so, people who inspire you.
From history, I'm going to go with Julius Caesar as a figure as one of those larger than life sorts of guys.
And as in his stories, he was a hell of a spin doctor.
Yeah, he was. You know, upon being captured by pirates as a young man and being offered for ransom, you know, it takes considerable cojones to go to your captors and say, you know, I'm worth a whole lot more than that. I mean, and they're not going to take you seriously if you don't deliver the proper amount of ransom. So here you go. Here. Let me help you negotiate.
Yeah, actually, it's not that hard of a read, The Gallic Wars, if you get a chance to read it.
Yeah.
That's, you know, it's letters from the front, written from a guy who's essentially fighting for funding.
No, that guy that was propaganda from the front, you know.
Yeah.
Oh my God, es parte de Luisa Est.
Yes. Yeah, he was a larger than life figure and awfully good at what he did. He was not
Right up until the point he crossed the Rubicon.
Yeah, exactly. His vision of the future it really only extended to sort of, you know, kind of the near tactical.
Yeah.
And what he could do with his sword, and he never really considered what would be happening with all the daggers after he got back.
Although, you know, what was the one where he it wasn't Silesia. The great battle where he surrounded a Gallic. He got it.
The one with Vercingetorix, where he surrounds the
city
fort on the hill,
and then they surround him.
and then they surround him, so he builds another fortress around the outside. And,
So the besieging army is itself besieged, and he still wins. It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
The guy was good.
Pretty badass.
yeah, he was awfully good at what he did. And him and Hannibal are my two favorites from history.
So let's look at more modern times, different art forms, like musicians or artists or people who tell stories using different mediums. Like, for instance, one of my favorite storytelling artists is Jim Henson. How many of you guys saw The Storyteller? The videos? I mean, just nailed it. And it's really hard to take something that is traditionally spoken word and bring it into a reality, and he did it. He just nailed it, did a glorious job. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Yeah.
Wasn't one of the stories from that show told yesterday at the, I forget what his name was, the older gentleman?
Older gentleman?
Oh, Soldier Jack.
Yes, yes.
That was storyteller Bill Howard, and they did the version of Soldier Jack where Death gets captured and has to be released and set out through be released so people can die, because it's pretty miserable if they can't. And I mean, if you look at both the writings of Todd and Jim, they're using tons of elements, fantasy folklore elements that, you know, have been passed on by storytellers, fairy folklore, you know, Native American folklore. I have no idea what folklores you're going to be tapping into next. Any clues?
Next book is Greek mythology. So
Really?
we're doing Greek stuff, yeah.
Oh, how cool. So, how about you, Todd?
Huh?
You using any folklore mythology in some of your more recent stuff?
No, I'm all over the charts in my real recent stuff.
Because you were talking about ancient Chinese curses yesterday.
Well, I was, and I was saying that if you want to look at it as a cheap way of breaking up plot, and I still like it, you can pretty much say that the three main breaks, or some main breaks in there, are the three Chinese curses. May you live in interesting times, may you be noticed by people in high places, and may you get what you wish for. And you can just pretty much sit there and go,
Well, that's a lot of Game of Thrones.
Except most of that's all just mixed up at the same time. But you know, you go to Star Wars and you can see it. You know, there's Luke saying he lives in interesting times. He gets noticed by both Obi-Wan and Darth, and so noticed by people in high places, and then he gets what he wishes for, except the Death Star chases after him. You can break it in Harry Potter. The interesting thing is sometimes you start with interesting times, sometimes you start with what you wish for, sometimes you start with noticed by people in high places, and they're all dangerous and they all change. But I haven't been. Well, actually, on your reading list, if you haven't done it yet, I wonder if you've read this one. It's been out for forever. You'll have to buy it in an ebook compendium. But the original one is the one that I tout most highly. Bridge of Birds by Barry Hewart. See what I mean?
Yeah. That is one of the best books ever. It
Yeah.
really is.
Bridge of Birds.
Bridge of Birds by Barry Hewart. You'll probably find it now. I got it in an ebook compendium, which is the Chronicles of Master Lee, and it's got all three.
Master Lee, number 10 Ox.
Yes. And I've been rereading that thing over and over again because it's just, it's a caper.
It is a delight.
It is
It is a delight.
It is a story set in ancient China that never was.
It should have been.
Yeah, it's just a lot of fun.
All right, well, you've crossed that Rubicon. Talk about your writer storytellers that make you go, woo!
Yeah, well, there's this Jim Butcher guy.
For me, I think one of the artists today who is most skilled in terms of craft and in terms of just the artistry of it is Lois McMaster Bujold.
Oh, she's going to be next on my list.
Yeah, Lois is wow. Professionally speaking, and when I have her baby, she is awesome.
I think it has to be the other way around. Right.
No, it doesn't.
They actually do say that they can get an embryo to attach to the testicle if you really want to try it.
Well, Arnold did that. There was a whole movie.
Yeah.
It wasn't good.
And then unfortunately we discovered that Arnold actually did do that in a different way, but we will go. I was pretty happy with him for that.
So other writers, it doesn't
Lois
necessarily.
McMaster Bujold would have been my next.
Okay.
Okay, I have a lot of fun with Shauna McGuire.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, her October Day series has been a lot of fun. Patricia Briggs, I love her.
Oh, I love her.
I love the Moon Call stuff. The Alpha and Omega doesn't work for me at all. So it's just, I don't know. But the Mercedes Thompson stuff is a lot of fun. I've recently been reading a lot of mill history. I'm reading some great books by a Canadian about the Canadians in World War II by a guy named Martin Zwilken. He does a good long run on DF, but also the Canadians in Operation Husky and stuff like that. Basically, I keep on coming back to the fact that there are two things that I've just decided that are just absolute truths in life. War is stupid, and you never want to be royalty. You just don't want to be royalty. It's if you look at the life of Elizabeth I, particularly before she got the throne, it's kind of her big question is which one of my relatives is going to kill me for what? Is my dad going to kill me? Is my sister going to kill me? And all of a sudden they're all dead, and it's like, oh, I get to be queen. But whoa, this is not exactly conducive to good mental health.
That was one of the things I learned early on when I started doing traditional Celtic mythology and folklore and stories. Is you look at something like the Toynbee Cúine, where you have Cuchulainn, the Hound of Ulster, going into warp spasm, and all these different segments. As you read through that, you keep running into the same thing. It was grand, it was glorious, they all died horribly. And it took me a little while to kind of figure this out, but I went to one of my go-to people, Dr. Seamus Duran, who speaks ancient Gaelic, which is pretty cool. And I said, why is it that we cannot seem to see anything good out of this? And he says, that's the hidden message. That's what the bards are trying to tell everybody in the room who isn't involved with stabbing people with swords, and that is, it's grand and glorious, and you will die horribly. Violence is stupid. But the problem is they're working for people who make their living stabbing people with swords. And so they have to kind of couch that in there. And you also see that when the Normans, they're in France and in England and places like that, they need stories. And so all of a sudden you have King Arthur and Merlin and that sort of thing. And, oh look, isn't chivalry grand? Don't we all want to be chivalrous? And we're looking at people who are essentially French Vikings. what is this sugary thing you're talking about? And so they were trying to embed these messages that hopefully it would take off, and it did, thank God. But it was a way of bringing civilization. Sorry.
Well, you bring up a number of interesting thoughts in my head. There's a book whose title I keep on not remembering, which is naughty of me. I think it's called The Greatest Invention Ever Made or something like that. And the guy is chronicling the origins of the steam age, which is a lot of fun. But he starts off fairly early on by saying that, you know, all our lords and kings started off as feudal robber barons, and they just figured out a better way to do it. And, you know, so that's kind of the origin of government, is a better way of taking money out of your pocket, which is true and always alarms me. So, yeah, I mean, why we have, chivalrous behavior basically helps the nobles anyway. You know, although you must remember that in chivalrous behavior, if I recall, was also drop de seigneur, which was the right of the noble to go ahead and spend the first night with a new bride.
Yeah, that may be a little more apocryphal. There was, I mean, sure, hey, I'm king, I get to do to you, is probably pretty much the law of the land.
Well, yeah, and also it was good for you too, right? Because,
Right.
you know, that royal stuff is really good. And then,
But you also have to remember that where supposedly this came from, these are the people who were Celts and Vikings and Normans and things like that. And I'm not bloody hell going to go through this, I king die. So, you know.
yeah, but I mean, we go all the way back to the founding of Rome and the rape of the Sabine women. You know?
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
you know, it's like,
So,
how to make friends and influence people.
So let me ask you guys, name, for instance, other storytellers and other mediums that inspired you.
When I was a kid, I had every single LP that Bill Cosby put out.
Ah, yes.
That explains it.
And a wonderful spoken word storytelling. Yes.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Bill Cosby can start talking and you absolutely have no idea the time's going by.
Yeah.
Vuba, 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 ding, ding.
Yeah.
And along that line, George Carlin. Oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, George, he would hit you so many truths so fast, you were like, ow, 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 again.
Yeah.
I loved the first time I saw Eddie Murphy's Raw.
Oh.
And unfortunately,
That was
since then
intense.
it's been downhill. Because all the white people and the folks are going, now wait until they start clapping and we'll get up and we'll run away, you know? It's like, yeah, okay. Let's see, who else?
How about music? Who are your favorite musicians?
This favorite thing you talk about, I do not understand. I keep on getting new people and all. I fell in love with Tegan and Sarah when I heard Where Does the Good Go in Grey's Anatomy of all things. They're a really great group. Just recently, Rob Thomas, who did the Kickstarter to get Veronica Mars made into a movie, had a soundtrack, what was it? I can't remember the title, but it was by The Delays, and that got me into The Delays and other stuff. So I'm kind of all over the place. I like music, I listen to it, I'm done.
I like Johnny Cash.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a good storyteller.
He was a very good storyteller.
My name is Sue.
Yeah, boy named Sue.
But if you look
Now
at
you're gonna die.
if you look at things like Simon and Garfunkel, there are beautiful stories in there. If you look at things like the Beatles decided they were going to use every medium. They were transmedia before transmedia was invented. Hey, we're going to make movies, and we're going to make books, and we're going to make everything.
Simon and Garfunkel was referenced in, I guess, several years back, because I'm one of these people who no longer actually watches television, in How I Met Your Mother, where they have the graphs of, what was it, Breaking My Heart and Chasing My Confidence Daily, and the intersection was Cecilia. That was cute. So yeah, we're getting a lot of crossover. We probably want more.
Yeah.
So have they done any graphic novels yet for Dresden? Yeah, they have.
Yeah.
Yeah, the new one is really great. We've got an artist that I really like, that is my favorite artist since the very first guy, Artie Sayaf, and the new guy's name is Carlos Gomez, and he's brilliant. But Ramirez is in this story. He really digs Ramirez, and Ramirez looks awesome in every single frame. He's so stealing the show in this one.
Well, I saw the print, one of the first graphic Trek novels, and they had Morgan in there, and he's an older guy with a beard and a ponytail, and I was like, finally somebody I could cosplay. Well, if you look at most cosplay, not a lot of guys with beards and glasses. I'm just sorry, and especially in anime, because if you have a beard, you're a villain. Yeah, sorry.
Or it used to be an English accent was a guaranteed villain.
Oh yeah.
And then now, of course, Harry Potter.
But that's just sexy. If you're going to be a villain, have a sexy English accent. Yeah.
You don't have a sexy German accent, no? Nein. It's nicht in Ordnung, yeah.
Well, you see the Jaguar commercials.
Oh, yeah.
With Tom Hiddleston and everything. And so, oh, look at all of us. We're all English and evil, and you love it.
Flying along in the helicopter drinking tea.
Well, we were in a LARP together the other night, and I was the embodiment of greed. And I'm not much of a combat monster, but I'm walking up to people saying, excuse me, would you sell me the spear of destiny?
Yeah.
And they're going, no, I have an oath to God. And I said, oh, I don't want you to break that. That would be bad. I'm going to have to kill you. And they looked at me and went, really? I said, yeah, but look at it this way. If I kill you, you go to heaven. Me? Not so much.
There's a win-win here.
Yeah. Stab, stab, stab. You're being very polite. Yes, I'm terribly sorry about this. Stab, stab, stab. And then, of course, we give the spear of destiny to the big bad guy with the giant wings, and I give it to him, and I say, go, fly! Run away! The good guys are coming. Good guys are coming. And I'm like, go, run away. He said, no, I'm drunk on power. Really? And of course, then the good guys win.
Oh, that's just...
I don't know. My character personally didn't win. Everything that was absolutely the most awful thing that could happen to him happened to him. It did help.
Hey, just like a dress to
Yeah, exactly.
I got to torture you for once.
Everything bad that could happen to him. But yeah, we did get away with a bunch of bad guy stuff and spirited it off.
Actually, I was thinking that we didn't think about inviting Lois.
Oh yeah, she's awesome.
She's just...
So how about we do this? Let's take a first round of questions from the audience, and if you would, keep the focus kind of on storytelling. Oh, and now the hands go up. Woo-hoo! All right, she was first, so we'll start with her.
Well, your storytelling, you talk about how you have having problems getting things to film the way you want it. Why don't you do a Kickstarter to be able to do the films you want?
Well, okay, one, that would mean I'd become a filmmaker and a Kickstarter person. Two, there's been one successful Kickstarter to film done so far, that's the Veronica Mars one. Three, they raised $5 million, I think it was, which was huge. To do Pern, you need about 150 million. So the gap between possible and required is a little bit too huge. Four, I got better things to do with my time. Honestly, I mean, I'd love to see Pern on the big screen done right, and I'll be happy to make sure that it happens right. But if it comes between bleeding for Hollywood, which frankly, I've seen too much Hollywood now, I don't want to bleed for it, or writing a really cool story that people will read or that I'll just enjoy writing, I'm on with the second one. So yeah, and it would be, the biggest problem is, the biggest problem is convincing the right people in Hollywood to let the right people outside of Hollywood help make the film. And usually the answer to that is no. And frankly, I would much rather never see Pern made at all than see it made horribly. Now, badly I could live with. You know, I would say that the Dresden Files TV series was badly, but it helped your sales a hell of a lot. I'll tell you, I bought the first book because I saw that now soon to be, and I said, okay, I'll do it. You know, so that helped. A lot of times you can get away with bad, but if it's terrible, people are going to go buy the
The best
original one.
films now are being done by independents, not in Hollywood.
Totally. Unfortunately, when you do with independents have the other side of the problem, which is they've got this itty budget.
Which is why you do Kickstarter.
No, the Kickstarter budget, Kickstarter got $5 million, which is considered huge for an indie, right? Not nearly big enough to do the live action that you need to do in Permax.
Yeah, as a scale model thing here, the badly made, as Todd would say, Dresden Files episodes had a budget of between 1.1 and 1.2 million dollars per 42-minute episode.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how much it costs to do that stuff.
And I thought the person who played Harry and the person who played Bob were pretty damn good actors.
Yeah, they're both skilled at what they did. And the guy that played Bob was a great guy. I loved him.
Yeah.
He was awesome.
You asked a question. You had said earlier that a good story is answering a question, right? What was the question for Game of Thrones? And is that kind of a story thing is that something that's like something new that people are starting to develop these like unquestionable stories, questions that they don't have like an overall question?
No, Game of Thrones has a question.
Yeah.
Who is, are they going, well, it's not just who is going to survive, but are they going to unite the kingdom in time to save it from the oncoming ice zombie apocalypse? So.
Well, I didn't see that.
Well, that's the overall question, but the whole point is that, or are they going to be too blinded by their internal struggle to get it together before doom overwhelms them? You know, they've got larger problems coming, and they really need to see that. But at the moment, they're so busy knifing one another that there's no way that they're going to be able to do anything. So, will they get it together in time or not?
It seems like the most successful stories are the ones that have the simplest questions, like, is this person going to survive that? Is this person going to stay at the university?
Eternal questions.
Well, there's power. Sort of goes back to your hero or heroine is only as strong, powerful, interesting as the villain or as the ultimate threat. Okay. One of the problems with Harry Potter is when you get down to it, Lord Voldemort is far too much cardboard. The guy never stops and says, am I doing the right thing? He's already way past that point, so he's pure evil, which means the level of growth you can get for Harry is limited as well. With Pern, we have another problem in that threat is this continuous threat. It's kind of like, oh, is threat falling today? No, oh, that's good, I'll go plant my crops. Threat's falling today, I'll stay. It becomes a perpetual threat. It's an overhanging thing that's very hard to work around. And in Pern, the way you work around it is you have people who have different ways of approaching, handling that threat. The Lord holders are saying, oh, let's just go inside and we won't worry about it. We don't need these dragon and other people. So that's where your problem is. But you need a big, the bigger you go, the more you can go. You can tell a very simple, will she fall in love with him story, but the scope is much smaller. Doesn't mean you can't tell a great story there, but the limits, the where you can go. I can, because I write fiction, I can sit there and say, page 1, and the earth blew up into 1,000,000 pieces. And then where do I go? I started my story with a very huge bang, and we want to go backwards.
I asked you last year, I said, you're already dealing with some really super powerful archetypes, close to, Odin, Queen Mab, these kind of archetypes. He's come back from death, essentially. Mm-hmm. Where are you going to go? And your answer was, we're going kaiju. We're going giant Japanese mecha monstrosity level power levels.
I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, Harry Dresden, you've just been resurrected. What are you going to do next? I'm going to Disneyland.
The great part about that was after I sent it in and Ann read it and went back to me and said, I can't believe you killed him. And you killed him? And that was pretty much the context of the email. And what I said, what I wrote back was, yeah, now we get to do the fun stuff. Exactly. And so now we've been off and running ever since then. So here.
The ghost of Mrs. Muir, it wasn't.
Now, how much were you influenced by Lois killing Miles?
Oh, probably.
Okay,
Yes, probably.
that was one of the first times where we've killed in.
That was brilliant too.
Yeah, I know. It was like, he's dead. And those of you who haven't read, how many people have not actually read the For Corsican series? You haven't?
Not yet.
I'm working on it.
All right, I want you to get up and leave the room.
Well, you're allowed to stay just as long as you.
How do you spell it?
Which was the first book you started?
It's a
For
Margaret.
the Miles books?
Yeah.
I started with the very beginning with Cordelia.
Okay, so you started with Cordelia, which is now, the story's really interesting, but the story behind the story, okay. As I recall Lois telling it, She had written, actually she's got a couple places, but she'd written the first 2 novels as one big huge novel, and it didn't sell. And she went on to write the sequel.
And I believe, was that the one that started as a Star Trek fan story?
I didn't know that. That would be news.
That's the story I've heard, was that it
Okay.
started
I never
as a
heard
Star
that.
Trek fan story with the Federation officer and the Klingon officer.
Well, that would have worked, but it certainly by the time you got near where I was, it was basically the same sort of problem. I mean,
Yeah.
two houses alike but divided in a
Yes.
big way.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, she had, the first one didn't sell, and she wrote the second one, which was the sequel with the child, Miles Warkoff again, called The Warrior's Apprentice. And that sold, and then the question was, do you have anything else in the trunk? And so they took the original novel and split it into 2 pieces, one called Shards of Honor and the other called Barrier, which they've now, just to confuse everybody, have slapped back together into a book called Cordelia's Honor.
Yeah, that second story had one of my favorite lines in it, in the entire thing. One of my favorite lines of British dialogue ever. But I didn't get you anything.
Yeah, beautiful. That was a good line. That was a good line. Well, I kind of like the whole, I've been shopping. That was pretty good. But my favorite was probably from Sita Ganda, where and it's authored, it's narrative. It's kind of like, and if there had been a blood pressure monitor attached to Colonel Faribi, it would probably be beeping plaintively at this very moment. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, this was the guy who was in charge of the character Miles Warkoff. So if Harry Dresden had a boss, it would be a similar situation. But Miles is far, far worse.
Yeah, and he doesn't need any wizardry powers. He uses his voice.
Yeah. Oh God, that character. Oh God.
Yes.
Was Max intentionally inspired by Ivan?
No, but probably unintentionally inspired by Ivan.
Yeah, but Ivan is also a hero.
Yes.
I have to admit. Although I just recently, again, because I watch things now on DVD rather than on TV, because, long story. But I just ran across again, How I Met Your Mother, the Naked Man episode, where you have not seen this yet, otherwise you would know. Has anybody seen that episode? Okay. It's the one where apparently, you arrange for some reason to go back to the woman's apartment and pretend to use the restroom or something, or she goes away and she surprises you. You surprise her naked, and apparently 2 out of 3 times this works.
2 out of 3.
Yeah. And I could see Ivan trying that, up until the point where he got married. But Ivan was definitely that sort of a guy. It's like, well, it works 2 out of 3 times, so who cares?
2 out of 3.
Yeah. The third time you may actually have to flee for your life and hope you don't get too many.
In terms of pickup artistry, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, Ivan was quite happy. He was happy going up to 10 different women and approaching them and going down in flames for a hopeful 11th.
Yes.
So anyway, but yeah, so Ivan is kind of one of those.
Did we have another story-related question?
So, storytelling, when you're telling a story yourself, is kind of different than the collaborative storytelling you get in a larger tabletop game.
Absolutely.
As a player or as a GM, how do you approach it differently?
Let's see. I'll let Jim take that one first, and then I'll take it.
Okay. My writing has been very good for my GMing because now I have many. See, in this case, you know how I say I love to torture you, and I have to have my characters to do that. Well, in this case, I get to torture directly.
Yes.
Because they're sitting right there at the table with me.
Hands-on torture, the only way to go.
Really, there's got to be a certain amount of sadism in you to be a good writer.
Right.
But yeah, and the thing is that players don't get upset when you're torturing, doing awful things to their characters, and picking particular doom for them. They eat it up. They really do. And I've had so much fun doing that. I kind of got started. I think Fred Hicks was the first person I really tormented in my games, and he reacted to it so well. I'm like, I need to start doing this to everyone. And at some point, I realized I had 14 people in my game, and in my 20 by 20 foot house. So it works. But yeah, I mean, I think that's really You really, and the other thing about playing with players is they never follow the script. They never,
No.
ever follow the script. So really, all you're really doing is frantically running out ahead of the players, building the world 6 inches in front of their feet. And the way, and then the game is convincing them that no, you really did have this all planned.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and then they're in awe of your world building ability.
Now, do your characters in your books actually follow what you tell them to do?
For the most part, those people work for me, yeah. If they won't do it, then I'll go back in and write something into their history to make sure that they do.
Wow. See, my characters usually do things like, fuck no, excuse me, pardon my French, but heck no, I'm not dying.
Right,
You
yeah.
know, it's like, and it usually works out well for me.
Oh, yeah. When it comes time to kill a character and say goodbye to him, mostly I just want to make sure to tell him, okay, you're going to get a really cool death scene, though. You know, it's not just going to be kind of a drive-by killing. You know, you'll have an awesome death. Oh, okay, cool. Just play it well. All right, good.
Yeah, when I I've just gotten my first novels done, and unfortunately, as a beginning writer, I used a lot of my friends as templates for characters, and one of the things I realized shortly thereafter is, as an author, you have to abuse your characters horribly. And when your friend Tim finds out that you threw him in the wood chipper, he may not be happy with you. And so now, if I use another character for any of my novels, I am definitely going to say, hey Tim, I'd like to use it as kind of a template for a character, and by the way, you're going to be eaten by radioactive chipmunks. It's just, it'll be awesome, but I'm throwing you in the wood chipper. That's just going to be the deal. As far as multi-narrative storytelling, one of the things you do as a storyteller, as a GM, essentially you're a storyteller, but you just have a whole lot more logistics to deal with. And because the dice will play games with you too, you know. Holy crap, he did save. Damn, I didn't plan on that.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, the dice. Well, how do I make this work?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, so he is a god now. But the thing that you need to remember is everybody has their own story, and you as the master storyteller, you want to weave that in. And one of the keys that I do is I look at the overall story arc that I have, you know, these are some of the cool things I'd like them to experience. Then I look at my players and I go, mental, emotional, physical, intellectual, physical, emotional. And I look at the player and I go, what would I like to see that character do? Where are they? If they're really buff, then I want to throw mental things at them. If they're emotionally, as shallow as wading pool, as a puddle, then I want to throw emotional things at them. And I'm going to incorporate that into their goals so that overall the story, I'm going to try to force them into areas where they are unsure. And so, like, for instance, if you have a paladin or cleric, you're going to throw them into moral quandaries. What do? Do you save the baby or do you save the village? Either way, you're a sinner. Torture. So
That is the sad part about telling stories at some point. Fundamentally what you're down to is you're doing horrible things to nice people.
Yeah.
best line ever.
Although the thing with the paladin, one of my happiest letters that I've gotten from somebody was that they took inspiration from Michael Carpenter and the Dresden Files for their paladin character, and their DM kept trying to throw these horrible choices at them, and that their entire purpose and the entire thing was to create the third option as their paladin. So when dealing with the horrible administrator or burgomaster or whatever who was forcing this horrible choice, instead the paladin dragged him out of his office into the front of the entire village, and then used his smite evil ability on to prove that this guy was actually evil, and kind of dragged him out into the light. And there are all these other instances where the paladin created the third option. And it's like because I watched the Dresden Files, that's what Michael would have done. Okay, that is awesome. I love that.
But the one thing, first of all, you're just trying to get everybody to share the stories and listen to the stories. And gamers are weasels in a box. They will get out every time. And, to a gamer, the question isn't how many angels can dance on a pin. The question is if we take this pin to a hand grenade, does it give me +5 versus chaotic evil?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way they think. And so, if you were a law officer and you pulled over a gamer, they were the last people you want to pull over, because in their mind, they've already figured out 5 different ways they're going to play this guy. Why are you standing there with a flamingo and covered in shaving cream? Well,
Funny you should ask.
Yes.
I'm glad you asked that, officer.
because they gave that just last week. So, another question. Young lady?
This is actually something that I wanted to ask you last night, so it's really just for True Thomas. Sorry, guys.
Sorry.
You're a celebrity, man. All right.
Oh.
Star power.
You should have come.
I still want you to sign off. Okay.
My favorite performance poet is a Canadian called Shane Croizan.
Woo!
Thank you. One person knows him. And I'm not sure I know the difference between spoken word and storytelling then. Is it the poetry aspect?
Okay. Story is the message. It's the encrypted file. It's what captivates us, the emotions, the ideas, and all the symbology that runs in the background that we don't necessarily see, but there's a ton of it, especially when you're dealing with myth, archetype, folklore, that sort of thing. That story can be turned into music, it can be turned into art, it can be turned into spoken word, it can be turned into poetry. It's how it's being expressed. And so each medium changes how the story is played out. That help?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, we got the gentleman in the back there.
Yes, the gentleman.
I was just going to ask a more general question. When you tell a story, whether it's a book or an actual story, of course you want people to enjoy it, but what do you want them to take with them after they read the story?
I don't ever think about that at all. I'm very busy telling my story. And I just trust that if I've got something that I want to say to somebody, it'll figure out its own way to come out during the process of it. The process of creating and telling the story is what matters to me. And occasionally I will find out things that I didn't realize were true before, until after I told them in a story. And I kind of stop and think about it and go, yeah, that's the point, huh? I never really considered that.
You know, a lot of times I suspect your subconscious plays games with you, and a lot of times you start out with some sort of vague idea of what's going on, but the huge theme doesn't necessarily play out. There's some things in writing on Perm that I've been working with. A lot of it is quality. One of the reasons that Perm came into existence was because at the time we had the archetypical female in any science fiction was the girl who was standing on top of the chair screaming about the ants or the aliens or the whatever. And my mother decided that if there were aliens coming in her door, she'd be grabbing a frying pan and beating the hell up out of them. And as we know from Tangled, the Disney movie, those frying pans. Who knew? Who knew? I love that line. That's like,
That's to be cast iron though.
All right.
well, that's a possibility, but
Cast iron, there's no room for
In my case, because my first chosen medium is spoken word, this affects me on a day-to-day basis, and I can demonstrate this really easily. My Lord, imagine, if you will, a dragon in a cavern. Quiet, water dripping off the stalactites. You can just make out the flames coming out of that long crocodilian snout. What color are the flames? Purple. Okay. Lord, when you are in that cavern, you can just make out from the light of the flames the color of the dragon. What color is the dragon?
rainbow, shimmering.
Excellent. My Lord, in the back. No, you. The dragon slowly opens its eyes. What color are the dragon's eyes?
Milky white.
Milky white. Okay. How many of you had those exact colors of flames? None of you. But here's the cool thing. As a storyteller, you all get dragons. And because the dragon is made up of what you are made up of, it is contextual and relevant to you. And so as storytellers, when we tell our stories, they go out there and they expand and they resonate to you in ways that are unique to you. And so we don't necessarily know exactly how that story is going to affect you. All we can really do at that point is know how that story affected us and hope that we tell it in such a way that it resonates with you.
Yeah, I like to say that writing stories, certainly writing stories, I guess telling stories as well, is kind of like brewing coffee. And then freeze drying it in the form of a book and handing it to somebody else who gets to add their own water, their own experiences to bring it back to their version of life. So many times I've heard people talking about things that they found in stories that the author never realized.
Oh, yeah.
So I was at your storytelling thing last night, and one of the things that I started thinking about after watching the three of you tell your stories is that the difference between a spoken story and just reading it in the book is you each created a character when you were telling your story. And I'm particularly thinking of Jack, that whole story. The way he told the story, I had an image that was kind of driven by his body language, the intonations he used and everything. So he took the written story, the traditional story, and he changed it and warped it by his performance. So the original storyteller isn't controlling that story. He's the architect of the structure, but what the facade of the building looks like is the person telling the story.
Well, Jim, you as a GM, when you are creating characters for you're creating the characters that the PCs are interacting with, how much do you actually get into role-playing the various characters and having them tell stories?
Not a lot, because I'm more focused on the players creating things and making things happen themselves. So I'll know all the story about the NPC, but I'll be having enough to know to have the NPC behave in a certain way. But my game is very, very focused on making sure that my players are the ones that are making all the choices and driving all the decisions of things that are happening.
So when they're coming up and talking to you as one of the people they're interacting with, so you keep it fairly compact and you don't go into a lot of drama or anything like that?
Not until it's appropriate.
Oh, okay.
And at which point, that'll generally happen when they're confronting somebody or one of the more major figures of a story.
Give me an example of a character that they would interact with who just ate the furniture.
The furniture eating characters generally tend to be the people that they're working for, or the people that they're working against but can't confront directly.
Okay.
So they'll be able to have the social confrontation with them, but not necessarily the more direct physical confrontation to them. So they'll be in the middle of a combat. My game is the kind of game where they'll be in the middle of the combat and suddenly the tea party will break out. The fight will be happening, and then the big villain will show up and be like, enough, all right. Obviously some things need to be explained to you. So you, minions, go fetch us tea, you bring us some chairs, set up the table over here. You people come sit down because we have to have a talk. And so then they'll find themselves talking with Morgoth over tea.
See, Angela, you're absolutely correct.
I told you.
And that's the kind of thing that I really enjoy creating in the game system. It's like, in the middle of the combat, a tea party broke out. And so that'll be the kind of thing, and that's actually rubbed off on the several people who run LARPs around the area. So we've literally been in the middle of a field of combat and then had and then a tea party broke out, and they brought in tea and sat down and like, really, we're going to sit here and have tea? There's a war going on. It's like, well, there's a war going on elsewhere. Right here, we're going to be talking about the course of the war. So sit down. Like that.
In the steampunk community, there actually is a thing called tea dueling. Yeah.
But is this like the ancient Chinese tea thing where if you don't do it exactly right, you lose etiquette?
I think there are about 15 million different variants that involve lots of caffeine and running to the bathroom.
I actually was running a Legend of the Five Ring setting game where at the end of it,
the entire focus of the entire campaign came down to an origami contest.
And if only I'd known.
Oh, yeah, and it was, it's, so that, they're like, what do I do? Do I go for the bird with the wings that actually flap when you move, or do I stick with something simpler and do the ship? And there was a long discussion at the table over this, of how we're gonna do it. Well, it's gonna modify your role based on what you're doing.
Well, you can make a box too. I mean, a really cool cube. That's super cool.
But you have to think back, okay, he's mentioning the Book of Five Rings, correct?
It was the Legend of the Five Rings, is the game setting, but, is there a Book of Five Rings?
There is a Book of Five Rings.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah, that's about Miyamoto Musashi, one of the foremost samurais.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Right, and so here's a guy who essentially was one of the most badass warriors in the world, 52 duels with giant razor blades, and at some point he essentially says, I don't even need the sword, I'll use a bow door.
But the whole point of that was it was a psychological manipulation of the
Oh yeah, I'm not saying he was, but what happens? He ends up becoming a poet, a writer, a painter. I mean, this is a great way of, and then writing a book of philosophy that has passed on to inspire Tim Butcher to inflict on his characters. Yay, ancient samurai, poet, philosopher. So, other questions?
The samurai's training actually consisted of poetry and painting. It was held in as high esteem as your master of the sword.
Yeah. Well, actually, training in spoken word poetry and oral storytelling was considered kind of obligatory pretty much once you got past the point of, hi, this is Brock, and he can hit you with a stick. And so, for instance, even if we go all the way back to in the case of the Celts, the Knights of the Red Branch, they had to know 5 great epics of poetry as a warrior and be able to recite. They had to, and for instance, the Knights, and I'm talking what we would like to imagine Knights, as opposed to what they really were, enforcers. Knights were expected to be able to comport themselves, to be able to dance, to be able to play chess, to be able to quote poetry. And we also saw that in the Muslim culture, we saw that in Chinese culture. You couldn't just be, the guy who hits people with sticks or road horse. You had to be somebody who could, and part of that was because they wanted those stories to help change those people, to help them become human beings, to be civilized. Other questions?
We've exhausted the audience.
It's Sundays.
It's
Yeah.
Sunday.
Sunday,
So-
my friends will come. Sorry.
A storytelling question for you, Jim. Have you ever told any of your stories as spoken word?
Oh, you mean the dress-up wild stories?
Yes.
Occasionally, yeah. The only reason I know what happened to Kincaid and Murphy when they went off to Hawaii in Deadbeat is that one of the cosplayers of Murphy asked me, and so it's like, okay, well, I've got to tell this story now, and so I wind up telling this deal, and now I know what happened there. But I wouldn't have known if somebody hadn't asked me. All the time people will come up and ask me questions, and the only reason that I know what happens in the story world is because somebody asked me this question, and I didn't realize I knew the answer until I was in the middle of telling them the answer.
Oh, cool.
That stuff happens constantly because I've got to build story world out in front of the audience, but I don't really tell them that I didn't know until they asked me the question.
Well, the answer was just waiting to be asked.
Yeah, exactly. The answer was there. I just needed the question to be asked.
So if we want to help our authors here, ask them lots of questions.
What is your favorite color? Blue.
Okay. How about you, Todd? Has anybody said, Uncle Todd, tell us a dragon story?
No. No, the nearest I got was somebody asked me if I'd donate a story to Fantasy for Good, which is the proceeds are going to go for colorectal cancer research, and gee, wouldn't it be nice if it was a dragon story? And I said, well, I can give you a dragon story, but it can't be a perm dragon story. And the story is titled Golden, and it explains why dragons hoard gold, among other things.
Oh, cool.
Yes, I now know why. Apparently you did not know, and why they're bad-tempered. See, because magic actually pervades everything, and magic tends to be absorbed by dragons a lot, so they get headaches from this concentration of magic. And gold happens to be a shield for magic. So what you do is you just go into your nice little gold cave, you burrow on down underneath all those coins, and the coolness and everything comes right on down.
Good to know.
See?
Right,
Take my
ever
cold.
have
Yeah.
That's right. And
No,
then,
so no wonder they'd be grumpy about that.
Yeah.
You want my migraine medication? No.
your Imitrex is mine.
So it was a lot of fun. But yeah, so a lot of times I'll come up with stories just because somebody asked me. Kevin Anderson at one point in a Range of the Future thing said, well, I can never get anybody to contribute to my Purple Unicorn anthology. And I went, challenge accepted. 24 hours later, I sent him off something called Rhubarb and Beets, in which I explained unicorns, fairy, cutting between the universes, and why they have a horn. That was really cool. So yeah, and
Purple Unicorn story, look for it.
it's in Shadows of the New Sun, which is a tribute to Gene Wolfe.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So both of you guys are parents.
Sort of.
And
Yeah, as
so,
much as a 12-year-old can be a parent, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm running a D&D game for my kids, you know, I help teach them about life by taking them to LARPs, you know, so.
This is good.
my son has now learned to GM for me while I'm driving. And so I'll be driving along, and he has run multiple worlds, and I had no idea what a malevolent mind my son had. He was about 11 or 12, and he ran a game for me, and my character was inflicted with great shape-shifting magical power that was mischievous. And so he'd get knocked off a roof, and he'd say, "Bird!" He'd turn into a hippo. He'd say, and so, you know, right, and I keep trying, so I try to game it. I'd say, okay, hippo. And it would turn into something else. And it was always the magic power trying to mess with my character. Until finally, just at the last minute as I'm about to hit the ground, zombie. Because it's kind of hard to kill a zombie. Kind of already dead. And he's like, yeah, I'll give you that. But
Yeah, that's one of the great things, my son says, yeah, other kids, when they turn 9, you know, their dads let them start backing the car down the driveway. My dad let me roll up a D&D character. So,
but that was part of your genetic attributes. You have to do this.
it's true.
Yes. We have to propagate the geeks. So that people.
That poor kid never had a chance.
Yeah. Well, so, did your kids ever tell you any stories that ended up in print that inspired you?
No. But my child did try at a very early age to learn how to tell jokes.
Oh, okay.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Peanut butter.
Peanut butter who?
Peanut butter, ha 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 ha. You got some work to do, kid.
I don't know, he's got everybody laughing now. He was very meta for his age. How about you? Anything that your children have said story-wise that have inspired you to do stories about?
No, but my son was very demanding about news stories that nobody had ever heard before when he was little.
Oh, okay.
So I had to come up with news stories that nobody had ever heard before for him for bedtime stories.
Yeah.
So we had to come up with, but then of course, like everyone, we're all children when it comes to stories, and the first thing that you want, that you hear from a kid when you get done with the story is, again.
Yes.
And so as storytellers, we have to face that quandary of we have to tell people the same story again that makes them happy as a child, and yet we also have to acknowledge their adult thing that makes them say, but give us one that nobody's ever heard before. You know, so.
My son, I would tell him a new story every night for a while, and it was called the Imagination Box. So he had a magical finger that he could push the button and then something would happen. He went back in time, he was molecular size, he had friends who were vampires and werewolves. And so this went on for some time, and every night I had to come up with a new story, which fortunately I'm a storyteller, so that wasn't so bad. But even I have, you know, my depths, and so I said, hey, let's start reading. start breaking out more and more complex books. I didn't realize The Hobbit was a bitch to read to a kid. Not because it was so hard, but because, like he said, again, you have to nail all of those characters you're portraying in the same voice night after night. I have no idea what Dory sounds like. Boing, boing. Trying to remember all these different characters. And then the other thing is as you're reading to your kid, you keep going further out the line, you start hitting, I didn't know Life of Pi was not a good kid's book. Because everybody was bragging about, oh, Life of Pi is such a great book. I'm reading it and, oh crap. This is not a metaphor. So, what books did you enjoy reading to your kids?
Well, as a youngster, my favorite was probably when the child was very little, the Going to Bed book.
Oh, yeah.
The sun has set not long ago. Now everybody goes down below to brush their teeth in one big, no, something or other. Yeah. It's just Sandra Boynton. She had beautiful.
Oh, Sandra Boynton. By the way,
Awesome
you can
stuff.
sing almost all of Sandra Boynton's book.
I can believe that.
Yeah, and reggae works really well too. So, yeah. But not
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
but not the, what was it at the end? The hippopotamus at the
but not the hippopotamus.
But at the very end, it was but not the armadillo.
But not the armadillo.
As I recall.
So Sandra Boynton, great writer if for
You
kids
got little
stuff.
Of course, then the next thing up the list has got to be when we did Narnia.
Oh, yeah.
We did Jill Murphy's Worst Witch, which was so much fun. We segued up to Diane Lane, and So You Want to Be a Wizard. Well, the second book in that series, Deep Wizardry, is still among what I consider one of the best kids' books ever. What else did we do? We tried to do Todd McAfrey, but somebody was incredibly resistant to the notion. And so that didn't happen.
As far as I know, Jay still hasn't read the Dresden Files, so.
Yeah, I can believe it.
Your son?
Just kind of, they don't want it.
There you go.
Ah!
You know, it's like, what happens if I like it? What happens if I don't like it? I don't want to, I just don't think I can deal with this type of
I dedicated the first book to you. Damn it, you gotta read this damn book.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no,
The more you
kids
push,
don't.
the harder it is.
Now I know.
Well, growing up, I was the first to read Anne McCaffrey, but at the time, when I was little, I was 9 years old, and my favorite book at the time was Space Cat on the Moon. I mean, it had a picture of a cat in a spacesuit with a big gold helmet, and your standard bone steel rocket ship with the 3 tail fins, looks like a Hugo, Preston an early age, and it was perfect. And then Bomb was published in F&SF, and the cover of that was a banana floating on a starfield. So I tell you, you're 9 years old, cat on the moon, banana in a starfield. Which are you going to go with?
You're gonna go with
Cat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I went with the cat. Now, incidentally, in the banana on the starfield, you had the ship is saying, and at the same time, you had the original novelette, Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes.
Oh.
It's like, yeah. No.
Although, if you were 9 years old, I don't know if Flowers are around.
I wasn't much older when I finally got into it.
Yeah.
It's still, it's like, oh.
But the thing is you go back and you look at the stories in children's literature, like Dr. Seuss, and things like that, or A Wrinkle in Time, or some of these other great stories, and we realize that, wow, those stories had power, and they expanded our brains so we could handle stuff and want more stories as we were getting older.
Oddly enough, A Wrinkle in Time did not work for me. I guess the problem was that she had so many daddy issues. I was like 9 when they tried to give it to me. But then I walked over into Heinlein. So.
Right, Heinlein, yeah, great stuff. Yeah, that's all young adult fiction.
Oh, sure, yeah. You know, things like Friday and, Stranger in a Strange Land and stuff like that. And it's a little bit different.
A shameless plug, not that he needs more gigs teaching writing, but he has a fantastic writer's course. And I got some of your writing course as well.
I have a writing course?
Yeah, you were explaining your...
Oh, that stuff. Yeah, that's just talking to people because the rule of thumb is that writers started out being readers. So in light and self-interest, we try and make more writers so that we have more stuff to read. Because it's very different reading your own stuff than reading something new and different. I mean, I'll read his stuff more than I'll read my stuff just because I know what's there. And then I start finding, well, maybe I could have done that differently. I could probably tell him he could have done that differently too. He won't listen to me, which is good.
But when you go to help other people find their stories, when you're giving them advice, what kind of stuff do you tell them?
Most recently, I still like the concept that there's a certain number of words that you have to write that are going to be bad, and you just kind of want to get those stories out of your system. When you're, and also there are definitely ages and stages to writing. 9-year-olds don't write the same sort of stories that 14-year-olds write. 14-year-olds don't write the same sort of stories that 18-year-olds write. And at some point you start writing stories that other people will read that aren't your parents or your best friends. And at that point you get to move into a place where you really want to be, which is where somebody pays you money to write stories. Because then you kind of have some sort of approval coming in, and it's tangible, and not only that, you can eat, which we like. So I say, I also love Howard Waldrop's writing advice, which is, if you've got a typewriter, you don't need a therapist. Because writing there's a lot of therapy going on. Every book, every story you write is going to change you. And it's going to change the way you see the world, and it's always a journey, even if you're just reading it. So my advice is generally write it. Don't do the highlight rules. Either write it, finish it, edit it, send it out, keep on sending it out until somebody sends you a check or a do not harass order. Usually a check is what you want to see.
What do you, when people say, how do I find my stories?
The main advice that I give to people is that you've got, the real problem with finding your story is that the real danger is getting stuck on one story. You've always got to write, you've got to get that story written, and then you've got to go on to the next story, and that's what you've got to be focused on is getting the next story written, because the process of going to the next story is going to teach you more about how you would have done the first one.
Sure.
And I think that a lot of people get trapped in trying to write just one story. It's like you've got to keep going on to the next one. You've got to own the next story before you.
But do you think that's a variant on what I call the writer's dance? The one where you get the toothbrush and you have to clean your bathroom completely before you can write another word, or any other excuse you can come up with for staying away from the typewriter? And so one excuse is, oh, I have to find the exact perfect word for this shade of blue before I can go on to the next sentence. All right, that's what we call writer's dance. You've got to recognize it for what it is and just put the word blue in, finish the darn thing, come back and put in a different word later if you really have to. But a lot of people will get, as you said, get stuck on the first one, but part of it is they're avoiding moving on. People talk to me about books that I've published, and it's kind of, oh really? Because I'm always in the next book. What's your best book? The next one, right? It's always the best book, the one you're keen on right now. So.
Another round of questions. Anybody have some questions? I cannot believe in an audience full of geeks, we don't have 2 questions for these 2 guys.
If you could write a story in any setting, any world, copyrights ignored, what would it be?
Ooh, good question. What universes would you guys like to play in?
If we go play in anybody else's universe.
Yes. Great question.
Yeah, I had in mind a long time a fan fiction for a tree cat marine in David Weber's books that I would enjoy writing. Because tree cats have just now started getting respect in the universe as actual people. And I would have one that would have been demanding back pay for the 5 years he's been in the Marines along with his buddy.
You want to pitch it to David? He's that weird.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, I know.
This guy.
I've got so many cool worlds to play in now. People keep on asking me to, well, obviously write more Herb stuff, but fortunately I've got a little sister. But they say, you know, write more Tower in the High stuff, write more, and it's kind of like, you don't understand. I got universes of my own that are banging on my head saying, get me out, get me out. And
I would love to write some LA stories for the Dresden Files. That would be a lot of fun. Because there's a lot of history and culture here that kind of lends itself to some weirdness, which would be a lot of fun.
I suppose if I had an option and I could pull it off right, because she writes it in well, I'd love to write in the book Crossing the Doors.
Ooh, that'd be
That'd be kind of fun.
The other one is I don't know, did anybody remember the Wild Card series?
Yeah.
You know, the Wild Card series, I have at least 3 or 4 great superhero / Joker / you know, different kinds of characters. There was, the Wild Card series was very hit or miss, but boy, when they were on it, they were on it. You know, some great writing happened there.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would love to write Spider-Man, but I got to do that, so. When I got to write a Spider-Man novel for Marvel, that was basically my Spider-Man fan fiction, except I convinced them to pay me for it, so.
That's the best of all gigs.
Yes, exactly, it was awesome.
Any other superheroes you would love to write for?
They offered, DC called and said that they would let me do either Superman or Batman, but I'm not enough of a DC fan to have been able to do either one of them justice. So I decided not to, but, what?
Justice.
Yeah.
Oh.
But yeah. I could see myself doing Spidey, I could see myself doing X-Men.
I would like to do a write-up on the Sandman from the Spider-Man series, as he finds out he's not, he's actually essentially an elemental. And do it from a magical perspective. That would work. Oh yeah, I mean, if he actually understood how his powers worked, other than, oh, I'm going to turn into a big sand hammer and hit you. Oh, the potential. So
yeah, that was what I enjoyed, was writing the Rhino as somebody who was essentially had exactly the same story as Spider-Man and had all these unique.
I have to find that. What was the story called?
It's called the Darkest Hours. You know, but the Rhino at one point is blinded and captured and assumes he's back at Spider-Man's base when actually he's at Aunt May's apartment, and assumes that he's speaking to Spider-Man's sexy major domo when it's in fact Mary Jane. And he's like, I just did the one thing after another. What kind of person gets superpowers and decides, oh, I'm going to go be a wrestler with them? What kind of loser does that? Me. What kind of moron gets his costume stuck onto his body? I'm the kind that's why I'm not cool like Spider-Man. And Mary Jane just trying not to laugh the entire time. And she's sitting there looking at Peter, and Peter's just like, shut up, okay, don't say anything, shut up. But yeah, the Rhino, it turns out, is not really, all that dumb or evil a guy. He's been a victim of bad marketing.
Right.
I tried to get to work just as enforcer and not wear stupid Rhino suits. But did they not believe? The mob I work for not believe that I'm Rhino. They say, "Where's Rhino hat?" And I'm so sick of Rhino hat, so I throw yacht into living room as establishment of my credentials and don't get job. So I go back to wear Rhino suit because now I just can't get to work without the Rhino suit. No one believe I am Rhino.
You need to have a character like that,
Yeah.
I once thought that if I had superpowers, the one I would probably love the most would be the one to remove electrical wiring from anything. So you have the evil car person in front of you who's leaning on their horn, and I do my magic, and all of a sudden, all of the electrical wiring for their car is sitting on top of their roof. And they ain't going nowhere for a while.
which I have to admit, in Los Angeles, once that copper wire was on top of the roof, there'd be 15 scavengers there in 2 seconds flat.
Yeah, well, there's that too. So, but that wouldn't be my problem. I would actually have done no harm, as it were.
Yes.
I'm quite proud of myself.
No, for my superpower, I want a quality of life superpower. Because ultimately having super strength or being able to fly or something like that, really not useful on a day-to-day basis. I want multiple man's power to be able to split off.
Oh God, Jimmy Madrox.
Exactly, so there could be like 7 or 8 of me playing video games and then 3 or 4 of me actually getting appropriate things done. Right? And that's about the ratio it would have to happen at.
The thing about, the great thing about Jamie Madrox's power is not so much that he can split into all these millions of different people, but that when they come back together, he has all their knowledge.
Exactly.
That's an amazing power.
So, like, one me would be out of the gym being awesome all the time. And, one me would be in charge of eating right, and one me would like get the writing done.
Right.
And then there would be 7 or 8 of me who could like play video games.
Do you think after a while,
have that absorbed fun?
right, do you think after a while some of his split off units come back and go, really? I get to clean the house again?
No, because that's why you have to have 7 or 8 playing video games, so you can trade off.
Yeah.
You know, about one day in 3 you're doing something responsible. You know?
Well, we're coming toward the end of the time, so I'm going to ask you guys one more time. Anybody have some questions for our illustrious guests, illustrated guests?
There's a question over here, there's a hand up.
I know you love video games, and I always find that the best video games always have a great story with them. What's yours? What's your favorite?
My favorite or his favorite? Or all of
Any
our
of your
favorites?
video games.
I'm not much of a, I'm sorry, Jim, I'm letting you down. I'm not much of a video game player. So.
That's all right.
Well, what do you mean
Jim
by
is.
video games is where I'd be? I mean, I started off with the Atari 2600. Actually, I started off with an Atari computer. And go backwards to that. But the game I play consistently the most is Civilization version 2. I will not go to 3, 4, or whatever, because they got stupider. And I like it for the infinite playability of it. And it's a huge strategy resource game. I'm not much into first-person shooters. It's kind of like, yep, that guy's dead. Whoopee. Oh boy, I got hurt. And it just doesn't do anything for me. I should confess that I am a Pokeholic. I have no less than 3 different cartridges of the new Pokemon X-Y. And just, they're really nailing it in terms of fun to play. And they kind of move the bar up in terms of internet connectivity and all. So yeah, I guess I gotta, as video games go, I guess that'll get there, but not much else does it for me. And there's other things to do.
How about you, Jim? We know that this is an essential writing tool for you.
I think the greatest transmedia video game that's come along in a while, at least in recent time, was the Halo series, which had, such awesome visuals, and it had a really cool story that you could follow, and it had great villains that kind of had their own unique characteristics and personalities as you got to know them. The way it was set up to cast the central player as the super soldier upon whose humanity's hopes depended, was a brilliant move. It had the awesome music from the Halo 1 game, with Gregorian music and so on. And the way they set up the dramatic scenes in that game and etc. It was so awesome, I had to go learn how to use an Xbox controller, because that's how awesome the game was, and that's how much I loved the music and the story and the setting of that game. And that was something that I learned to do together with my son. So we'd be playing, and Jay's strategy was always charge forward firing until your machine gun is empty, and then start clubbing them with your machine gun. And everything will work out.
Yes.
And I would be coming along behind him with the sniper rifle, picking off the guy that was about to get him from behind, and covering the kid. And that was how we
Dad, a little help here. Dad.
No, he never asked for help. He never noticed the help.
Oh, okay.
Boom. Yeah, I did my part. And Jay would be like, have you caught up yet? Yeah, I caught up now.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up then. It has been our honor to have the amazing Mr. Todd McAfrey and the fantastic Mr. Jim Butcher here to discuss storytelling with us here at WyrdCon. And I would just like to say thank you to WyrdCon for promoting storytelling, and I'd like to say thank you to our audience for being here and sharing your stories with us. I have no shame.
I don't know. Yeah, that's the character I was playing yesterday. It was the mental voice of the rhino in my head.
That's what that was.
Well, your character was a lot of fun.
I've already signed